Coming up on episode 120 of the Behind the Back podcast, the Seattle Seahawks are your Super Bowl champions, and they won in Levi's. So we obviously break down what we saw from that game, what we enjoyed or didn't enjoy, and then leave off some takes that we saw from both the Eagles and the Niners on from Media Row, a lot of the topics that were talked about during Super Bowl weekend. And then after that, we pivot on over to the worst team in the league, the Sacramento Kings. We do a draft lottery simulator for the first time, so that'll be a lot of fun, so stay tuned for that. See where we end up and who we would pick with our spot that we ended up in as we discuss who might end up being the future of the Sacramento Kings. But we talk about their youth movement versus the vets and what we expect is going to happen post-trade deadline. With that being said, y'all, let's get it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I am Marcos Conde-Negrona. Beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet. Rhett's Ben, my brother. How you doing today?
I'm recovering. I'm doing okay. I'm a little upset about the Super Bowl, but we'll get into it.
Yes, sir. I know. Very interesting game, to say the least. Congratulations to the Seattle Seahawks for being the world champion this year. It was a fun run while it lasted. Philadelphia, we'll get it back next year. So let's talk about, we got a lot of great stuff to talk about. We're going to be trying some different things today, and stick with us. It's going to be a great pod. We appreciate all of you guys who showed up today or who are listening to us. We appreciate you taking time out of your day. So let's get into the Super Bowl. The Seattle Seahawks, unfortunately, dominated. It didn't feel that way. The score was weird. It was close. Kind of ugly, but it felt like the Seahawks were in control the whole time, and they ultimately end up being the champions. So how did it feel coming from a 49ers fan watching your hated rival win on your field?
I'm not gonna lie, it sucked. Like it was it was like a lose-lose situation, right? We kind of talked about it last week. Like on one hand, the Patriots would win their 7th Super Bowl and single-handedly own that the record with 7 at that point. On the other hand, the Seattle Seahawks go into Levi's and get a Super Bowl. And so it's like there was no way of winning there. But I made a little bit of money off of it, so I can't complain too much about it. I think you called it my coping mechanism in one way there, and I think that was a lot of it. But the game itself, like, it would have been a lot more. Let me put it this way. I would have been able to swallow the pill a little bit more of the Seahawks winning in that building if it was a fun game. But that game sucked. Like, I thought that the Eagles putting the whooping on the Chiefs last year was a bad game and boring game, but that was way more fun than what that Seattle game was. It just felt like all game long, I just was waiting for the Patriots to throw a punch.
Yeah, that's how I felt too. Pretty disappointing performance. The score was 29-13, and it was a good fourth quarter in terms of it was 17-13, right? That's where all the points came. And I mean, Drake May ended up with like 295 yards. And so it was tough performance. Great job by the Seattle defense for making things difficult. That O-line just was getting torn apart left and right, whether it was injuries or inexperience or just, not being good enough. It was a tough look for, Drake in that offense. And there was times where Drake was, that's what the Seahawks have been doing to everybody all year. That's kind of like what the Eagles were doing last year. It's suffocating defense. Like even when they tried to go out to the flat, oh my gosh, Eamon Warry's right there. They tried to, go out, they tried to go deep. They couldn't get anything there. They tried to run the ball. They couldn't run on them. It was just a defensive performance. It was really well done. Shout out to Mike McDonald. He came in and 2 years in was able to win a Super Bowl. The Seahawks are in a good spot. It's hard to go back to back. You watch the Eagles, who looked like this insanely dominant team, struggle in their next year, and Seattle's going through their own, coaching drain, losing Kubiak. So it's going to look different, but Drake, the schedule May is now something that it's crazy to think that 3 days before the Super Bowl, he was second in MVP voting, and now all of a sudden the narrative's completely flipped back on its head. So that's kind of my main takeaway from it. It was definitely I thought when they scored that first touchdown, then I was like, oh, maybe we'll get a game. And then he throws the pick. And I was like, well.
Yeah, I just feel like, at the biggest stage, like you work all season long. I don't care what your schedule look like. Like you play the teams in front of you, yada yada. We've had these arguments. But you play the teams in front of you, you get to this stage. Why wouldn't you get a little tricky? You know what I mean? Like the past couple Super Bowls between the Eagles and the Chiefs, and then you go back to the Niners and the Chiefs, like all three teams got tricky in one way or another in both games, And so like in this one, it just felt like the Seahawks had the game so much in control that they didn't need to get tricky. And on the Patriots side of things, it was like they didn't want to. It was like Vrabel just played like a safe game. It was like a very Kyle Shanahan-esque game in a lot of ways. And for me, like my whole thing on this, and this maybe is a way to wrap it up, is like in a Super Bowl, you have 2 weeks to prepare for a team in general. So 2 weeks to watch film on this entire team, you're not going to be able to run your normal business operation going into these games. You got to get tricky. You got to get a little bit, in your bag, deep in your bag, in order to get some of these first downs, get some of these drives going. Like obviously the separator in this one, like if the Patriots early on were able to get one of these drives to the house, this is a totally different ball game in my opinion, from a momentum standpoint. But they just couldn't get anything going. So I think for this game, you got to look at the coaching, and you got to look at Drake May, and you got to think like there was a lot of missed opportunities, and maybe the coaching battle was, or lack thereof was probably a lot of the reason why the Patriots are where they were at.
It's an excellent point you made, and I actually will, bring a stat to the table from that exact point. Josh McDaniels, I was listening to the Bill Simmons podcast. He had one of our favorite people to listen to, Nick Wright, on the podcast from Fox Sports for First Things First. But like, they were talking about Josh McDaniel, the coach for the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots. He's coached in 7 Super Bowls now, and as an OC, and there was a crazy stat that they had for him that in all the first quarters of those games, his offenses scored a total of 3 points in 7 Super Bowls. 3 total points in the first quarter. Yeah, and there's been some crazy Super Bowls, right? The 28-3, the Eagles game in 2017, that was a crazy high-scoring game, but never this offense, and that was the case for the Patriots this year too, was always slow starts, never really got off the ground, and I thought that was a great point to what you made, and we talked about it going into the game. I was like, everyone's talking about Vrabel and his experience, and technically McDaniels too, because of all his experience he had, and they got the floor wiped with them by Mike McDonald, the second-year dude, so I think it's a little overrated when it comes to, that kind of coaching experience from a player. This was still Mike Vrabel's first Super Bowl as a coach. And he has, not had the best track record in big games, even in his time in Tennessee. So that was definitely an interesting point to make. And again, it was, I think, the biggest difference in the Super Bowl.
Agreed. So overall, like, game was boring, crappy outcome, not thrilled with it. But I gotta say, Levi's Stadium looked really good for that Super Bowl. Like the fixes that they made to the stadium in the offseason, adding that video board's awesome. They have a whole new laser display that was on full display during the halftime and more. Like everything that they did, even the grass at Levi's looked just a little sharper this time. Like it was a really nice setup for Levi's Stadium for the Super Bowl. So, shout out to Santa Clara, to the San Francisco 49ers as well. Like they definitely knew how to host in this case. During the week, Radio Row is what they call is some of the events during the week. And there was an interesting topic that came up that I wanted to kind of throw around here. So George Kittle, I mean, already a San Francisco legend. He added some fuel to the offseason and some of the speculations as to who the 49ers might kind of add moving forward. Kittle was discussing expectations for the 49ers And kind of he framed this past season as a rebuild year. I mean, you and I threw around the idea it's a retool year. He used the word rebuild, and he said that in a rebuild year, you're able to get 13 wins. Like, here's the exact quote. Message for 49ers fans. Hey, if a rebuild year got us 13 wins and a win in the wild card round, that's pretty good. Kittle said, it's only going to be a little bit better from that. And all the boys are coming back again. And who knows, we might add some past friends. So he was then pressed to clarify those comments a little bit more. And he kind of opened that door a little bit wider. And he said, I don't know. Kittle said jokingly, I hung out with Deebo last night. That was fun. So a little bit of a hint at maybe a Deebo Samuel return to San Francisco. And even, Christian McCaffrey was asked about it during the week as well. And he just kind of hyped him up, saying like he's the ultimate teammate. He's a guy that you want to have in your building, so on and so forth. So 49ers could be in the market for a Deebo Samuel return, which is interesting to me. I have an opinion on it, and I know you're going to get that from me here in a minute, but I want to kind of toss it over to you here because, he's a Commander as of right now. And, we watched him this year. It was a down year for the Commanders for sure. You called that. And it was a down year for Deebo as well. Thoughts on maybe a return to San Francisco for Deebo?
Honestly, I'm not against that idea for either party. I think Deebo is the kind of player that fits the 49ers style of play. Obviously, in his prime, they built the offense around him. And I mean, last year, it was a kind of a down year, but 72 catches, 727 yards, and 5 tutties. Like, I know he didn't play every game, but he was still consistent, and he was still a leader in the locker room. And it was a shame that, with the Daniels injury, they never got to, achieve what they wanted to. And I think a Deebo return, would be needed. You guys need wide receiver depth, even if Deebo doesn't have the exact same role, but he's still a reliable target. And he knows the scheme better than anybody else. So I think that it's just one of those things that I think if it happened next year, it would make sense. And I think it'd be well received around the league.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, the biggest thing for me is the 49ers like to have a fire on the field. They like to have these guys who just create these fires, get a little bit rowdy, go crazy, maybe punch a long snapper here and there, right? These are the guys they like to have in their building. I mean, you look at kind of who they want to throw out there as a coaching staff as well. Deebo is one of those guys. And on top of that, one thing that's been missing for the 49ers this last year, and I mean, even the season before with Deebo Samuel, but really this last year as well, was the yards after catch and yards after contact. Deebo is that guy. Like, he has made a career for himself with Yak. So from that standpoint, like, is he great at separation? No. Do the 49ers need a separation wide receiver? Absolutely. Is he somebody that can create plays out of nothing? Yes. Is that something the 49ers need? Yes. So he doesn't check all the boxes of need for the 49ers, but he does check a box that's extremely important to a Shanahan offense. And that to me is like why you got to really consider this. And I mean, it's probably going to come down to Jawan Jennings or Deebo Samuel. Right. And every indication right now is that Jawan Jennings has probably played his last snap here in San Francisco. If that's the case, I don't think this is a bad move. He's a good veteran to have in the locker room as well, just for all the reasons I kind of described. And I don't think that would hurt, and additionally, you can go into the draft. I know the 49ers don't have a great track record of drafting wide receivers, but if you hit this year and you have a good draft and you draft a wide receiver, and we're going to get into all those and who we think are the good players here soon. If you hit like that, then you have these guys in your building, a Christian McCaffrey and a Deebo Samuel, who you can look up to and kind of develop behind. So I think there's a lot of good reasons to bring back Deebo Samuel. And I'll be honest, on the last note, he just looks better in San Francisco 49er red and gold.
That's right. No, you're not wrong. And I think that, I wonder, there could be conversations, Deebo for Ayuk, just like straight up, like, just, hey, you took on one of our disgruntled receivers last year. How about you do it again this year? only this guy actually really has a past with Jaden. So I think that would be an interesting topic. But what, was there anything else cool coming out of the San Francisco camp during Radio Row?
During Radio Row, not really, but the 2025 NFL honors did happen. Yes. And I wanted to talk about that. So the NFL honors happened on February 5th. Obviously it's February 11th as of recording. So all of this has already been said. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there's one thing I wanted to shoot back and forth with each other. So obviously the winners, Christian McCaffrey won the comeback player of the year. He had a fantastic bounce back year after the Achilles tendonitis, which was terrifying the season before. So shout out to Christian. He deserves this award above most, but also all those finalists as well. Hell of a season and a bounce back year. Christian McCaffrey also won the Salute to Service Award. For those who maybe don't know for whatever reason as of now, it's a USAA Salute to Service Award honoring his extensive support for military members, veterans, and families through charitable work and foundations incentives. So really cool award. Love all the work that he's doing there. Now, the finalists is where I really want to talk about this. Christian McCaffrey was also a finalist for Most Valuable Player. Didn't win that. It went to Matt Stafford, as it should have. He was also a finalist for Offensive Player of the Year. He didn't get that. He was so close to taking it from Jackson Smith-Njigba. Jackson Smith finished with 14 first place and Christian with 12 votes. So it was close. It was closer than I expected, to be honest with you. But the one I really want to talk about is Kyle Shanahan was a finalist for Coach of the Year. I had been saying he was Coach of the Year. I also had a feeling he wouldn't get it for the reasons that I anticipate he didn't. And this is interesting to me. So Vrabel, Mike Vrabel won the Coach of the Year, and it was not really that close. It was 302 points to Vrabel. Liam Cohen was second with 239. Mike McDonald with 191 was third. Ben Johnson 145, and then Kyle Shanahan fifth with 140. He's not even close to Coach of the Year. And you have to consider what this team went through. I mean, we talked about it at an exhausting rate, the amount of injuries they had to overcome. Yes, going into the season, they had one of the easier strengths of schedule, but by the end of the season, they had the fourth toughest schedule. So you look at all these different factors, all these different players who hit the field, all this adversity that this team had to go through, and Shanny rattles off 13 wins with a chance at the number one seed at the last week of the year, with all this rest disadvantage at the end of the year as well. And he's fifth in voting. So, I don't know if you had immediate reactions to this or kind of what your thoughts are on the Shanny fifth in the Coach of the Year thing.
I was surprised. I do think it's harder for a coach that's been in the same team as long as Shanahan to kind of break through in that spot. But it is kind of frustrating that they don't. It kind of felt like Week 18 almost decided it for him. I think that had they beaten the Seahawks in Week 18 with all those stakes, and they were the number one, and y'all were the number one seed and everything, they probably would have been like, "Wow, look what he did." But then they kind of shifted over to the Patriots. So, I mean, Vrabel was the good story all year with the Patriots too. But then it really that part with Vrabel kind of disappointed me versus I would have been more okay with Mike McDonald because he fielded the best unit in the entire league this year. And I would have been okay with Combs too. But Shanahan, I think all those guys have a reason to be up on there, but I do think it was a little disrespectful to Shanahan that he didn't get the, more votes than what he got.
Well, and for me, Shanny has never won Coach of the Year. He's been in the running before. And one of the reasons and arguments that he didn't win it previously was the strength of schedule. The Patriots had one of the easiest, if not the easiest, runs, in the regular season. So it's what are we actually judging these coaches on at this point? And does it change year to year? I don't know what it is. I will say today I saw a video of Vrabel after the Super Bowl. He's in the tunnel, not even in the locker room. He's in the tunnel. Everybody's walking through. I'm not sure if you saw this. And he's he's hitting every single player. He's like, it sucks, but we're gonna be mad together. We're gonna hate this together, kind of thing. Like, we are a team. We're gonna be back. This, and he was using the phrase like this. This was 307 days of what is going to be so much more. So, like, from a leadership standpoint, I mean, Vrabel's always been a really good leader coach. He's that kind of a guy. Yeah. So I understand it from that point of, standpoint. And I guess watching that video has I guess made it a little easier of a pill for me to swallow in the coach of the year. It's just tough though, because I love Shanahan. I've rallied behind Shanahan for as long as I can remember, basically the entire time he's been here. And through everything that guy has had to go through, you see all the gray in his beard, everything. Like, he endures all of it. He embraces all of it. And he's just a hell of a coach year in and year out. So he might not have got it this year, but I think he'll be up for it soon. And I think eventually we'll see him with the Coach of the Year award.
I agree. I think a lot of things have to go your way to win Coach of the Year. Yeah. And like, there were a lot of excellent choices this year, so it wasn't, it just so happened that a lot of the guys were in his own division, and it was a tough spot. But either way, was any other news for the Niners that came out of Super Bowl weekend?
Yeah, so I guess the last little thing, well, there's two more things. But one more thing about the awards was Roger Craig he was elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame class of 2026. Running back for the 49ers from 1983 to 1990. I mean, just revolutionized the running back position with his dual threat ability. And what I mean by that, this came up multiple times this season. 1,000 receiving yards and 1,000 rushing yards in the same season. And that was 1985. And, this is just, he's a legend, man. Like, 3-time Super Bowl champion, 1988 NFL Offensive Player of the Year, 4-time Pro Bowl selection, first team All-Pro in 1988, second team All-Pro in 1985. He was the 1980s All-Decade team. He was named to that team. He was an NFL reception leader from 85 to 92, or in 85 with 92 receptions. Like, this guy's just a legend. So it's really nice to see Roger Craig finally make it into the Hall of Fame, and watching the video of him, at his house and the knock coming on his door. He doesn't even let the knock happen. He kind of knows what's happening, and it was really special. So I love to see that. Love Roger Craig making it. But last little bit, the 49ers are playing not one, but two international games this year. So we're recording on February 11th. It was announced today that the 49ers are reportedly, it's not official, but it's highly likely, playing a Mexico game as one of their home games. Whether they're in Levi's or Mexico City, it's a 49ers home game, because the fans out in Mexico are fantastic. And the 49ers are very familiar with Mexico City. They've played there a few times, and they've got a good market there. So I'm actually I'm stoked about that game. Only an hour time difference there. No big deal. The one that bugs me is the 49ers versus the Rams in the land down under. Marcos, we're packing our bags and we're flying 16 hours to play in Melbourne, Australia. So this is going to be a Rams home game. Now, there's some interesting little tidbits with this. There's nothing official with the schedule yet. Obviously, we're all waiting on the schedule to see what happens. But a few sources claim the game could be the season opener, and that the NFL could look to have that game on Labor Day weekend, which would allow the 49ers and the Rams to have more of a rest, basically like a week and a half to recover and be ready for the season. If that's the case, I'm all for it. Genuinely. Like, that would be fine, because they would have time to come back home, readjust, reacclimate, and then get ready for, essentially the start of the season at that point. But if there isn't like a week plus break in there for the 49ers and the Rams, both teams are going to struggle with a disadvantage. Even if, you look at it technically and they don't have a disadvantage, they're going to have the disadvantage of having all that travel time and having to readjust to a 19-hour time difference. So this one's interesting to me, and we're going to have to keep our eyes peeled on kind of how that shakes down. But this is going to be a fun one, honestly. Like, Melbourne's a really cool market, a really cool country. And there's a lot of 49ers fans out in Australia. It's technically a Rams home game. It's not going to be a Rams home game. There's going to be more red in that stadium. And, you know, there's going to be more red in any stadium. The Rams are considered the home team against the 49ers anyway. So this isn't really a change. And Puka kind of even said that. It was really funny. But a little bit of quick, I guess, little nuggets on where the 49ers are playing, and then I'll toss it over to you for final takes on it. So where they're playing is called the Melbourne Cricket Ground, the MCG. Since it was built in 1853, the MCG has undergone numerous renovations. It served as the main stadium for the 1956 Summer Olympics and the 2006 Commonwealth Games, as well as hosting 2 Cricket World Cup finals in 1992 and 2015. It's also noted for its role in development of international cricket. The MCG hosted both the first test match and the first one-day international played between Australia and England in 1877 and 1971. It has also maintained strong ties with Australian rules football since its codification in 1859, and has become a principal venue for Australian Football League matches, including the AFL Grand Final and the world's highest attended league championship event. This stadium, Marcos, holds 100,000 people. So I'm stoked for that. I'm stoked for the atmosphere. I think it's going to be bumping. This is the first ever NFL game in Australia. Like, it's a hell of a representation sending these 2 division rivals out there. And I'm looking forward to that, especially if the schedule permits it. But Marcos, thoughts on the 49ers and the Rams in Melbourne, Australia?
I think long run, big picture of it, it's great that the Rams, that it is a division game, that the Rams have to give up the home game, right? Like, you know, even for Mexico City, that is a home game for you guys, and it really, travel-wise, is not that far. Yeah. So I really liked that. I know with the Eagles, you know, having experience with, you know, I was thinking about how are they going to do this Australia game, and you reminded me about them having it at the beginning of the season. That's what the Eagles did when they went to Brazil. They were the day after opening night, and they played that Friday, and that gave them an additional week. They gave them an additional half week for travel. And this is going to be interesting because, you know, from what the Eagles players said, that trip alone felt like a season of its own, like its own separate season. It's going to be a lot. And it was 10 hours to get to Sao Paulo. If they got to go, you know, 16 plus hours, that's going to be a tough transition for both teams. And, you know, so that'll be something to monitor. And, you know, with, you know, the way the Niners' health has been, it's definitely something, traveling like that and having to readjust to that is something that is something that makes me worried a little bit. But the idea, the stadium, I saw what it looks like. It looks super cool. The environment's going to be lit. I think it's going to be a good time. So I'm excited for that. And it is I don't think, you know, especially if it is early on, getting that matchup early, you get to see the best of both of those teams, hopefully. So, no, that's really cool for you guys.
100%. And kind of the final thought on it. Pat McAfee was kind of talking about like flying to Australia, and he was like, you're going to hate your life. You're going to wonder why 8 hours in, why you're up here, why you're doing this. And about 12 hours in, you're going to be like, what if we just go down right now? Like, you know, nobody's ever going to know because you're just flying over water the entire time. So this is going to be a hell of a flight for them. And I feel for them. 16 hours on a plane. I hate everything flying for 5 hours. I'm like, why am I doing this? I can't imagine tripling that and then turning around and playing a football game. But you know, these guys are some of the best athletes in the world for a reason, right? So I'm looking forward to it, but that's all I got for the 49ers.
I love that. Now we'll pivot over to the Eagles and the news that came out of Radio Row for Philly. And there was a lot going on, obviously. Jeff Stoutland leaving. We talked about that last week. That was kind of the main topic from Radio Row was how are they going to replace him? And they got a replacement. His name is Chris Kuper. Yes, Chris Kuper. He was a former offensive line coach for the Minnesota Vikings. He was there the past 4 seasons. Didn't really have that great of success, but that's going to be the guy taking the mantle. Thought it needs to be mentioned because of who he's replacing. But he had worked previously with Sean Mannion before, so there's a little bit of experience there, and Josh Grizzard. So there is a level of experience with some of the staff members here, so it won't be like a totally new guy. So that's kind of the news there. And then when we talk about something else from the Super Bowl that I thought was a little interesting, before the game they did a Super Bowl Legends, and they brought out a few guys. You got your Eli Mannings, you got Peyton Manning, you got Tom Brady, Emmitt Smith, and there was another guy there, one that you would recognize. It was Jalen Hurts was there, the only active player there, and I thought it was hilarious that he was featured. I didn't even know that was going to be a thing, and he's just out here aura-forming with all these guys, Steve Young, Joe Montana, and Jalen Hurts, like he's in selfie videos of Steve Young and stuff. I was like, okay, Jalen's living his best life right now. What did you think seeing Jalen as a Super Bowl legend? It has to be Super Bowl legend.
I think so. You texted me about it, and I've been trying to digest it for a minute because I was shook when he walked out on the field and they were announcing all these guys, and then Jalen Hurts walks out and he's got his glasses, like he's all kitted out, looking all aura farming, and then you see the picture, and it is a legendary picture. I can't lie. There's legends up and down, and then there's Jalen Hurts, and it's like. Here's what I got to say. Did he have legendary Super Bowl performances? Absolutely. Is that what this is all about? Absolutely. So in that framework, this picture makes sense. But if you look at legends, if you think from a legend standpoint, legends who have played the game of football, you've got all these guys in this photo, and then you've got Jalen Hurts down here. He's won 1 Super Bowl. It's like, I don't know, man. So I think overall it was cool. I think it was cool for him to have that moment to kind of be recognized for his play at that stage. But you gotta take it for what it's called and nothing further, in my opinion.
Exactly. I thought it was cool. You got a lot of people. A lot of Eagles fans, ready to run that clip for anybody. That'll be the defense for anyone who hates on Jalen next year. So that'll be great. I thought that was mad funny. But in other Eagles news, Micah Parsons was doing his podcast, and he had multiple guests on. One of them involved AJ Brown. AJ Brown made an appearance, and he made an appearance with multiple guys. He was on a thing with Derrick Henry as well. Derrick Henry's doing some recruiting there, but AJ reaffirmed his stance that maybe he was being a good soldier, which is weird, but he says that he wants to stay in Philly and he wants, things are good. I don't know how much I believe that, how much of that is pandering, we'll see, but and still remains to be seen whether the Eagles want to pull the plug on AJ Brown. It's not that simple, but it's not impossible. And, if he wants to stay and, maybe this offense helps him out a little bit more, great. But that was kind of the big news, was AJ kind of coming out and putting some rumors to bed that Adam Schefter said the same thing, that they sat down and had a conversation and he's excited about next season in Philadelphia. So it wasn't like he was hinting about anything else. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know if you took anything from it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing to take from it is that I think he just wanted to see a change of scenery, and not even for himself. It's just a change of scenery and who was running those plays. I think the displeasure and the dislike for Patullo's offense was so obvious from top to bottom. And I think Sirianni was sick of it. Jalen was definitely sick of it. I mean, last play call against the 49ers, Patullo runs his little book, calls the play, and Sirianni and Jalen are kind of looking at each other and looking at him like, really, this is the crap you're calling? And then, obviously you see how it shakes down. So I think from AJ's standpoint, he just wanted to see them shift away and potentially bring in somebody who, might elevate this offense to a level where he's able to be, one of the top receivers again. And I think maybe just with that addition, he feels like, they might be an opportunity here to run it back. So.
Yeah, the Eagles are in an interesting spot. Who knows? Because just like you guys, the Eagles have the opportunity to take a receiver in the draft. That's the route they want to go. But there's going to be a lot of guys to choose from in a lot of different positions in this draft. Considering in our spots we're very close this year. Who knows? Maybe we may orchestrate a trade of some sort. So it'll be interesting to see what the Eagles decide to do. But if I would think that if we figure out anything about AJ Brown, we're going to find out about it here in the next couple of months before the draft, and I don't think we're going to wait till after. So I thought that was interesting, and I actually think that was pretty much it on the Eagles news. Yeah, because there's a lot of other stuff we can talk about that, what some of the media guys are saying about the future of this team, but it really isn't important right now. But the O-line coach got replaced. We got a new run game tight ends coach too. I apologize for not remembering his name off the top of my head right now. But the Eagles are kind of settling into the offseason mode now, and it really is, starting to lean towards draft season. So I think, Mahaffey? Yeah. He was on the Packers. He was on that staff with Manny, and so there was a familiarity there. So appreciate the poll. So yeah, so that was all the big news coming out of Philadelphia. Nothing major. I thought the Jalen being the Super Bowl legend thing was kind of cool. So it's something they can't take away from him because it'll be featured forever, which I love. So they can't hate on it. So that's going to be it. I mean, for the football season, crazy, wild ride. Unpredictable. I don't think anyone would have said Seahawks Patriots was going to be the Super Bowl and this was the results. So if I had any final thoughts on the NFL season itself, I think crazy ride. I think either one of our teams, if we were the ones representing the NFC, would have crapped on that Patriots team. I think if Bo Nix didn't get hurt, Broncos might be the ones actually winning the Super Bowl, or at least making it a fun Super Bowl. But overall, it was a crazy season, and I do look forward for what this draft season has, what this offseason has. Some big moves, some big trades probably going to happen, and hopefully our teams are involved in one of those.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of called it pretty early on that the winner was going to come from the NFC. It was just a matter of how it shook down. But the NFC is loaded, and it's going to continue to get even more loaded. So it's going to be wild. I think what I'm really looking forward to is we kind of talked about this, and I'm going to announce it now on the pod, is we're going to look back at all of our preseason predictions on each of these divisions and see just how well we did or how far off we were. Because I'm going to tell you right now, I didn't have the Seahawks winning at all, and I didn't have them winning the division, and that went different. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see kind of how our takes panned out. But overall, hell of a season. A lot happened. It's going to be a crazy offseason for sure.
Hey, you got that right. So let us pivot on over to the NBA, because you know what? We may be fans of the literal worst team in the NBA right now, but there are things to talk about because there's some interesting momentum developing with the Sacramento Kings team, and we're also going to do our first, this won't be, for most of you guys, this won't be the first time you're seeing what we're going to be doing, but it's going to be the first time we're doing this on BTB because there's actual hype about us getting the number one pick. So we're going to do our own NBA draft lottery simulator. We're going to be doing this on a weekly basis now until draft night, or at least until the draft lottery, and we know what, our spot is. But we're going to be doing this just because it's been all the rage in Sacramento, because who knows what we're going to do, but at this rate, we're guaranteed a top 5 pick. So it'll be fun to kind of talk about some of these prospects now, get a feel for how we feel now before we get into March Madness next month and things elevate and we get to see these guys on the big stage and who we would want to represent for the Sacramento Kings. But before we do that, we're recording again February 11th, Wednesday. They're about to play the Utah Jazz. And there's been a lot of talk surrounding the Utah Jazz since their trade. For Jaren Jackson Jr. and that big old trade, right? And the topic is about exactly the same thing the Kings are doing. They're just doing it in a different fashion, and it's tanking. And the Kings are, I think with the injuries and all the youth that we have and have chosen to play, we are bad, but also ethically tanking, I guess is what I would call it. I think the way everyone else thinks about the Utah Jazz and what they're doing is unethical and intentionally tanking. And I honestly, me personally, I don't really see what the big deal is. I think if I was Utah, this is the right play. And I mean, nobody criticized OKC for doing that for years when they got to the point that they are now. And I think Utah is on the doorstep of something special. And if they lose for context on the Utah portion of it, if they get worse than the eighth pick, they lose their pick this year. So there is reason for them to have a worse record. Right now they're sitting at 17-37, only 5 wins more than us. So it's not like there's some play-in team that's trying to lose on purpose. So for me, that's kind of how I view this whole thing. But it is funny how people are really crapping on Utah and saying this is a disgrace, this is open tanking. And then you look at the Kings who are doing it even worse than Utah, and they're just like, oh, they're bad, they're Sacramento. So I don't know, what do you think about kind of the way we're being talked about in tanking versus like teams like Utah or Washington? Or do you think it's like as big of a deal as they're making it out to be?
I don't think it's as big of a deal. I think it's more like shocking the way that Utah is going about it. Because like the other night, the situation, I'm not going to know exactly, but it was essentially that like they were up pretty big, like 12 points or something like that going into the fourth on the Magic. And they sat everybody that was popping, like Lowry, they sat Jaren, they sat like, and they just let everybody else play, and they lost the game. And it was like this, everybody's looking at him because it was fresh off the trade deadline. Like Jaren had just moved there. And so, I think considering the spotlight and considering the manner that they went about losing, it drew a lot of attention. Do I disagree with how they're doing it? I hate tanking in general. So I'm not going to agree on tanking necessarily, but I see why they're doing it. It makes a ton of sense. Like, you're outside the top 8 and you lose your pick. I would do the same thing to make sure that I get a top 7 pick, because this draft is fully loaded. And it's going to be loaded throughout the entirety of the lottery, and then pretty deep in the first round as well. And you can still find guys in the second round, but like top 10, and for them it's top 7, and you've got a franchise altering player in a lot of ways. So I think for them, considering where they're at, considering like they're going to be a good team next year, they're looking at themselves right now and they're saying, we've got 17 wins. We reloaded in a lot of ways at the trade deadline. Why not go out, try and keep our top 7 pick, our top 7 protected pick, and get a bucket, get a player to add to what we've already got going. So it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and you're watching them. I promise this isn't going to be a Utah pod, but you're watching them, and they got Keontae George and Markkanen and Filipowski, Collier, all these guys, so they traded for Markkanen, traded for Jackson, and then they had these guys that they handpicked, and they still have Cody Williams, they still have all these like young guys. Plus, you get to add a potential top 7 pick from this class, and Ace Bailey. This was their most recent pick this year, and so they're in a spot where like if they luck in and if let's say they win the whole freaking thing and they get Darren Peterson and they add that to their roster, all of a sudden they're maybe a contender, maybe a playoff team. I mean, Keontae George is having a breakout season, so I think it's one of those things that if he continues to elevate with these guys, they got a team. So and you're seeing the same thing kind of happen with the Hornets right now too, where like all these draft picks that they made are kind of now starting to build and get repetition together, and they're winning a lot of games now. And so there's a path when I look at it for the Kings that we're going to end up with a top 5 pick this year. Like in this class in particular, that's like that's altering. That's going to be a huge step for this franchise. Who we bring in, it's not going to feel like a disappointment, at least to me. And because we'll talk about it in the draft why, we think certain guys will do. But I think in this top 5, it's going to be can't miss. And I'm really excited for what the Kings can do. So for the Kings to keep losing, we're on a franchise record, 13 losses, right? So that hasn't happened. And then we're talking about some bad Kings seasons. We're talking about a lot of bad teams that we have fielded. But for me, this one doesn't feel, well, me personally, it doesn't feel as bad because I saw this coming from a mile away when we got all these freaking vets and all this. I was like, I just want to see young guys because we're going to be bad anyway. But we're here now, and we are playing these young guys. So, what do you feel about how the approach the Kings have started taking? I would say in the past 10, 15 games or so, where they really have leaned into Neek Clifford and Maxime Reynaud, Dylan Cardwell. We're seeing Devin Carter. It was reported he's getting the start tonight in Utah. So like we get to see real minutes from these guys, and now we're seeing Daquan Plowden, like G League guys. We're seeing potential pieces like can these guys become rotational players in the future? But at the expense of all these vets that we have on this roster, do you think that, and these guys are still on the roster, the trade deadline's over. Last time we talked about it, we thought like, can they make another move? They made 0 other moves. So, we have these vets now. So what do you think what now post All-Star break, what do you think this team, do you think they're going to be able to balance this is what I guess my question is.
It's a tough thing to gauge right now because the Kings are, I'm gonna call it like they're in like la la land in a lot of ways, where they're doing two things. They're embracing the youth, they're embracing the young guys on the team, giving them more rotational minutes, giving them more opportunities. But then at the end of the game, you're still ramming DeMar DeRozan and Russell Westbrook down our opponent's throats. Like they're popping for, they'll take 7 shots down the stretch of a game and they'll make one of them, 2 of them, and it'll be the reason why we lose. Like that part of it to me, before I answer the question, has been really frustrating. The most recent example of when I was really frustrated was Devin Carter getting his second straight game of like 20 plus minutes, and he was popping off. Like he was having a really good game. And they rip him out of the game with like 2 minutes left and put Russell Westbrook back in the game. I love Russell Westbrook, but like, dude, this is a guy who could potentially be a foundational piece of your team. And he's got so little NBA experience because you've continued to just let him ride the bench. You haven't given him an opportunity. If there's an opportunity to give a guy a chance right now, it's now. Like that's who you give it to. So I guess in a lot of ways, it's now to answer the question, it's hard to say kind of the direction that I could see this team going post All-Star break. If I had it my way, be honest, like I'd work a deal with DeMar DeRozan to buy him out. Yeah. Like I think that there's 2 avenues here. DeMar needs to get honest with Scott Perry and be like, dude, come on, buy me out. Let's go. Let's put me on a different team, right? And the other side of it is Scott needs to have that conversation with them as well and be like, like there's just not a role here for you on this team. Like you are a future Hall of Famer. With playing with these guys right now, it just doesn't make sense. Yeah. And I think you got to have similar conversations with a lot of these vets. Because the direction I want them to go is completely lean into the young guys. Like, if I had it my way, Zach LaVine wouldn't play another minute on the court for the Kings, or he would play like a first quarter, second quarter, you sit him for the second half, which was kind of what was happening post-trade deadline. Like, we saw like a hint of it. But it's hard to kind of nail in the direction that this Kings team is going right now. And I don't know if it's a Doug thing. I don't know if it's a Scott Perry thing. I don't know if the vets are just, quietly or not quietly crashing out about certain things. It's a hard gauge right now.
Yeah, I think what we're having to deal with now is we're seeing bright spots from these young guys, right? Dylan Cardwell's really blossomed. Maxime had a 20 and 19 game against New Orleans, and Neek Clifford had 30 on Cleveland, and it was really consistent. Like, these guys are having their moments, but you're right. Like, clutch time moments, they're being stolen by Russ and DeMar, and it would be the other guys too. But Domas has been hurt. Keegan's been hurt. But James Ham from Locked On Kings said that he could, if the playoffs were on the line, Keegan probably could have been playing last week. So I think they really are just being careful with him, and we probably will be seeing Keegan soon, which is huge because if we're talking about the vets I want to see, I would be okay if DeMar didn't play another minute, Domas and Zach, and I hate to say it, but even Malik too, just for the sake of getting more young guys, and having DeAndre Hunter and Keegan Murray. as my vets that are in there, and Precious Achua for size 2. But like, those are the guys that like I see on the future of this team. Like, we're going to be seeing Keegan and DeAndre next year, so we might as well see him with these guys, and that would be the extent of it for me. And we also need to give Keegan the reins if we plan on letting him be the guy next year. So he definitely, I believe we will be seeing Keegan for sure getting serious minutes once he's healthy enough to go. But like, it is tough. Like, I want to see more of these young guys. We're gonna be forced to see. We'll probably see it tonight. DeMar is probably gonna jack up a lot of shots with no other veteran there, and it'll be up to these rookies, when for the rest of the season, and up to the coaching staff to really give them an opportunity to play with each other and grow some chemistry, because these are going to be the guys that stick around next season. So, and I feel bad because I think this was, a doomed season from the start. And I think that, I don't think the vibe is that doom and gloom though. And I think it's because we know we have a top 5 pick coming. We know that we're going to get off these contracts eventually. And the buyout on DeMar is very real. There is a way for us to restructure it to loot so we can get some money in return from this, and give DeMar a chance to go compete because he deserves it. But, that's kind of it. And, we can, Russ is on a minimum deal, so we really wouldn't get anything from him from buying him out. And Domas and Zach is impossible. So that has to be an off season / next, year, and just let it ride out. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what this Kings team does moving forward. I hope that post All-Star break, we get a healthy Keegan. DeAndre Hunter suffered a scary eye injury against Cleveland. I believe it was against Cleveland, and it was pretty bad. He said he lost vision in his left eye. He got elbowed really hard in it. So now he's out for, some extended time, at least a week and a half at the very minimum before he gets reevaluated. So it's just like, sucks for him, and I'm afraid that he's going to be wearing goggles. So we'll see how that turns out for him and if that affects him at all moving forward. But that's kind of how I feel about this team, is like, I'm ready for the youth to just take over. I don't care that we lose, bro. Like, we're about to do a draft lottery simulator because I'm excited for getting the best possible freaking pick. But we've seen how that backfires. But before we do that, did you have any final thoughts? Kind of, actually, I did want to ask you something. Do you trust? Because we got into an argument. We did the pod on Wednesday, and I didn't ask you the right questions, and because I was surprised with how you responded to what the Kings weren't able to do in the trade deadline. Do you trust? How much blame do you put on Scott Perry for this season? Because I guess that's my main question. And then follow up after that. Do you think it would be wrong if Doug Christie was the head coach of this team next year?
Let me put it this way. So our argument was that I crashed out right after the trade deadline, because you were like, "Yay, no trades! Yeah, we saw this coming from a while." And I'm like, "Yeah, this sucks. Like, this team is in hell. We've been here for years. We are never gonna rebuild this team." Like, I was just full on crashing out, and you pretty much were like, "Dude, like, what are you tripping about?" Like, Scott Perry had no way of moving these guys. Like, he did what he could, but his hands were tied in a lot of ways. And for me, I will say this: my reaction isn't 100% how I feel, but it was a knee-jerk reaction to the past. I'm just going to call it 20 years that this team has continued to torture its fan base. For 20 years. So right now, yes, Scott Perry comes in. He says we're rebuilding. This is the first time technically that the Kings have fully rebuilt in Sacramento in X amount of years. It hasn't been in the last 20. But if you factor in the last 20 years and you say that it's felt like 20 years that we've been rebuilding, because it does feel that with one-off year with Beam Team 1, I'm at this point, like, I'm ready to be competing. Like, I'm ready to have good guys in Sacramento again. And so the tough part for me, the tough pill to swallow for me, was the fact it was another trade deadline that went by where we heard all these rumblings, whether, it was in-house rumblings or external. We heard all these things, these potential things happening with Domantas Sabonis, interest in Zach LaVine from the Bucks, interest in this guy or that guy. and nothing happened. And we had all these conversations about getting a pick, getting youth in the building. And okay, we lost one of our 6-pillar guys. I'm so tired of the 6 pillars, Scott Perry's 6 pillars. We lost one of our 6-pillar guys to make up for a Scott Perry mistake that he made in signing Dennis Schroeder. So it cost us one of our assets to get rid of a mistake. And on top of that, it cost us a pick. So it was like, it just felt like a wham, wham, wham situation where we couldn't win. And we were stuck with this team with these terrible contracts and these veterans who very clearly don't want to be here. Now, example would be DeMar DeRozan, who's out here throwing water bottles. I don't blame him, by the way. Yeah. I wouldn't want to be here either. So from that standpoint, I'm frustrated. But I understand when I take a step back, it's kind of like this. Let's say your brother has a room for 10 years. And then one day he decides he's moving out and you get his room. But he didn't take any of his stuff with him. So you walk into his room and there's clothes on the ground, there's toys and crap, there's broken things everywhere. Like, and then your mom walks in and she's like, "Clean your freaking room, dude." It's like, I didn't make this mess. Right. Clean your freaking room, dude. Mm-hmm. This is the Scott Perry situation right now. Yeah. And when you accept that kind of thing, it's an easier pill to swallow. So do I trust Scott Perry? I do. I just want it to go so much faster than it's going to. Like, it's so much easier to say this is going to be a 3 to 5 year rebuild than it is to accept that it's going to be a 3 to 5 year rebuild. And that's where I'm at right now, because I'm ready to see a competitive team in SAC again. We got the little bit of competitiveness for like a year and a half. And since then, nothing. It's been back to basketball hell. In fact, the worst basketball hell that I can remember this team being in. So that's kind of where I'm standing with it.
So then on the Doug portion of this, so I don't know what the Kings' options are going to be next year, right? So it's hard for us to have this conversation now because, like, we don't know if a coach gets fired in the offseason or if all of a sudden the guy's coming back that we're like, oh, we didn't think this guy was going to be available. Like, we don't know for sure who is out there right now. But do you think it would be the wrong decision if Doug got a fair shot at, because it wouldn't be his pick. You know, he would have an influence on the pick if he was drafting it, but it would be Scott Perry's pick. So how much confidence would you think that, like, if Doug was the coach next year, that he would be able to coach like a young core of guys who are more his style than these group of veterans who don't fit anything that he was actually meant to teach?
It's really hard to tell, if I'm being honest. Like, it's hard to tell how good of a coach Doug is because of how crappy this roster construction is. Yeah. And I think that it's another one of those lose-lose situations where it's like Doug's not making a good case for himself as an NBA coach right now, whether, you know, he needs to or not. That's a whole separate story. Right. But he's not making a good case for himself. And aside from that, like, the roster itself is just so poor. It's like, how do you coach this? And with the constant shifting of, like, are we playing the young guys or are we playing the veterans? And, you know, is this guy wanting more minutes or so on and so forth? Like, he's had a lot to juggle throughout this year, on top of it being his first real year as an NBA head coach, his first full year. So I want to say first, Doug is a Sacramento legend. Like, was with the Kings for years, was awesome here. He is absolutely somebody who in Sacramento's history will be painted on the walls for years and years to come, even if this doesn't work out. And on that note, I personally don't think that Doug is the guy moving forward. Like, I think this was another one of those situations, and we kind of talked about this off the pod, where it was like Scott kind of had a forced hand in a lot of ways. There wasn't a lot of great options from a coaching standpoint on the table. And I think Perry kind of saw it for how it was. It was like, this is a team that's going to be mid to bad this year now. I'm just going to keep the guy that multiple players have come in my office and said, I want him next year. I'm going to keep this guy moving forward, and we'll rebuild this thing under Doug Christie until maybe we can get a different path moving forward. But I think with the lack of direction right now that this roster is heading, not necessarily that the organization is heading, but just what the roster is heading, it's hard to pinpoint if Doug is the guy moving forward. And I'll leave it with this. Like, you asked a really good question the other day. Would you rather bring in an established coaching option to lead our future number one pick, or whatever that pick is, or keep Doug? Because those are our options. And I think that was a really good question, because it also kind of puts it in perspective. But it's kind of like, I would rather have stability was kind of the direction I went with it. Yeah. I was like, that was one of the things that De'Aaron was asking for when he was here. He said, like, do not fire Mike Brown. You know, bring back Mike Brown. If he's not my coach next year, see ya. Yeah. Oh, here we are. No De'Aaron Fox. And so from that standpoint, like, I want stability. If Scott Perry, because I do trust him, if he feels as though Doug Christie is the direction that he wants this team to go, then yes, move forward with Doug Christie. But what I don't want is for us to roll into next year with Doug Christie, have the number one draft pick, draft whoever. We have half a year or a year of Doug, and then the front office makes a rash decision, whether correct or not, to fire Doug Christie and move to a different head coach. And then we've got a different conversation on our minds of, you know, now our number one pick and our potentially future franchise player is now with his second coach already. That's the kind of thing I'm afraid of.
Yeah, and I want to put things into perspective too. I think a great comparison for what we could do in terms of continuity and, you know, keeping things consistent is just look at the Jazz. I know we've been talking about them because, you know, we're playing them today, but the Jazz made an example of we have Will Hardy. You know, the Jazz's record is terrible, and he has a terrible record on his resume, but they have stuck him with bad teams, and he's had some bad luck with injuries and things like that, and he's gotten good draft picks, and they signed him to a big deal. He's under contract for 4 more years. They committed to Will Hardy because next year he's going to have like the roster in which, all right, let's see your coaching chops, right? We built you a roster. Now go be the coach we know you can be. And if we went that direction with Doug, because his contract is 3 years, so he might have next year to prove, okay, we're giving you a number one pick. Can there be potential here? So there is a chance that maybe they can turn it around if they're able to kind of reshuffle this roster a little bit and give him a fighting chance. So that is just something I'm interested in. And again, if a really nice option comes out there, like a Taylor Jenkins is like, I want to coach this team, I'll be like, okay, I will be on board with that. I would trust, you know, someone like that with our roster or with a number one pick. So it's like something like that would need to happen. But I think I'm kind of accepted the fact that we're going to be bad enough anyway next year still, where we're still not at that step. We're going to enter the business of trying to get as much young, good talent as we can. And that's going to take some time. And like the 3 to 5 year plans, because it's going to take 2 or 3 nice young first round picks to really swing this roster around in a cost effective way. And that's been the strategy in the NBA these past couple of years with some of these teams that have won it all, is they did the same approach. They sucked before getting good when they don't have the money. Like, that's just how it works. And they did it. I just hope that the Kings, they do have to hit on their draft picks. Scott Perry did a decent job with some of the guys that we have this year, but maybe we're a bad team, so we don't know how, if any of these guys that were on another team, what their position on the roster would be. But I liked what he has brought to the table in terms of evaluating young talent. So I am excited to see what's going to happen with this year's draft with Scott Perry.
All right, let me ask you one more question, then we can probably wrap it up. Would you consider us in rebuild right now? And the reason I'm asking that is, like, my stance on it is just because you're tanking doesn't mean you're rebuilding. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, the rebuild happens. For me, the rebuild will start when we get out of these big contracts. Yeah. But I wanted to hear your perspective on if you think the rebuild is actively underway right now.
I think technically yes, just because we got rid of some of those dudes, just the Keon and Dennis of it all. Even if it was to make up for a mistake, that was a sign of, like you said, you phrased it right, that a rebuild doesn't start until the teardown is complete, and he just picked the first Jenga piece off. So that's kind of where I felt. I didn't think we were rebuilding. I thought that going into this year, health, and everything permitting, if I thought fully healthy, these guys were going to compete a little bit more. And I thought they were at least a play-in team. So that wasn't the feeling of rebuilding. It felt like retooling for mid. And that was kind of how I felt going into the season for them.
Yeah, and I think for me, a realization happened recently with why I had the reaction I did at the trade deadline. But like, it was that I was ready for the rebuild to just start.
Yeah.
To just like essentially kickstart in a lot of ways. Meaning we get out of a Domas or, a Zach, yeah, but that wasn't really going to happen. It was mainly the Domas thing that was on the table. And that was like, I love Domas. I like him here in Sacramento for a lot of reasons. I think he's good for the development of our centers right now. But like, you get out of that contract and you're already ahead of the game in a lot of ways. And now because you weren't able to get that done for this, that, or the other reason, like it just feels like it felt like a step back, even though it really wasn't a step back, just because the conversation of taking a step forward was happening. So
yeah, you just go back to being stuck. Like, so I totally understand that. Like, I get it. But I am glad, like, and Scott even tried to flex it a little bit when he was asked about it too. He's like, we didn't make any rash decisions, and I'm glad that we didn't. I'm not going to let anyone else influence me or anyone on the outside influence me. So it's good that, like, I think he's aware enough where he hears the hate that, that he got, but he's also saying, like, you guys, you trusted me with the job, so you're going to have to let me deal with it one way or the other. So it will be interesting to see. Okay, so we are switching over to our NBA draft lottery simulator. So this is the records right now as it's set up. We're just going to hit sim lottery and hope for the freaking best. And then depending on where we land, and it's going to be either 1 through 5 here in this scenario, we will kind of discuss who at this point in time on February 11th, who we would take with whatever pick we land. So here we go, Ben. I'll let you go first once we get it. Oh, the Hornets won. Sacramento picks 3rd. So we got Charlotte, Chicago, Sacramento. So I would say we can kind of talk about more, but I think the consensus top 5 college prospects here are obviously Darren Peterson from Kansas, AJ DeBonsta from BYU, Cameron Boozer from Duke. You got Kingston Fleming from Houston, and then Caleb Wilson from North Carolina. Those are kind of been the most, like, kind of the consensus top 5 so far. There's room for movement. There's a lot of guys that we can pick in this spot. But number 3, if you kind of have to feel that if you're going 1-2 here, this is Charlotte, right? So Charlotte, would they take a Darren Peterson? So would they take an AJ? And would they take an AJ or maybe even a Cameron Boozer? But who do you think will be on the board at 3 for the Kings?
I have a feeling that AJ for some reason will still be on the board, maybe just because I want him there. But I mean, I'll be real, like Caleb will be on the board 100%. Boozer will be on the board 100% with those 2 picks. I think either one of those is one of the safe choices at 3. But, you kind of mentioned it earlier, like 1 through 5, it's going to kind of lay itself out. And I don't think you can make that bad of a decision unless you took somebody who's completely outside of that. But, yeah, I'd be happy with either of those 2. I'll be honest, if Darren Peterson's out there, I'd be questioning it. I'd be questioning why he's out there.
Yeah, let's talk about that real quick because I was really excited. Arizona's my college team and it's been my college team because my stepdad went there and he's a huge fan and grew up a huge fan of them, right? So they had Kansas on the schedule in their most recent game and it was at Kansas and it was hyped, and just like real quick right before the game, it's announced that Darren Peterson had flu-like symptoms. He's missed 11 games this year for one reason that felt like a legit injury, and then a bunch of others that didn't feel like a legit injury. And now there's rumors about his agent being more involved with like the associate director, like they're in like direct communication for what Darren wants to do. If that kind of player, now if we're talking about if he's there at number 4, right? If we're 4 and 5 and like that's it before the next tier, I'm taking him. But like if let's say we get number one and it is between like Darren and AJ, how would do you feel like with all this kind of weird stuff going on with Darren, does that kind of turn you off a little bit? Because we see the player, right? I know we've talked about him, but like does the player outweigh kind of what's going on, especially since it's about like sitting out and injuries?
I'd be so worried about the future, especially if, again, 3 to 5 year rebuild. This would be basically year one at that point. I would be concerned that him or his agent wouldn't be on it, and want to vibe through Sacramento's rebuild process. So like for that, I get so nervous taking a guy who might not be fully invested. Like that was one of the nice things about Tyrese Halliburton. I hate to bring it up, but like he embraced Sacramento. He embraced the drive to get back to the playoffs. He embraced the culture of it. Like he wanted to be in Sacramento and be a part of that. That's the kind of player I'm looking for in this draft. And I don't know that you can find that in Darren Peterson. Now, does his skill outweigh it? In a lot of ways, yeah. But again, man, I'm just concerned with the longevity of desire to be here in Sacramento.
That's totally fair. So if I had to pick a three, I think I would feel safe. I think for me in this instance, it would probably be Darren and AJ. And if I had to pick out of the other three that I had mentioned before, I would say Caleb Wilson. I think that I would take a chance on his skill set. I think if we're talking about the pillars of it all, he fits, the mold of a player who you see so much raw potential. And we're going to go young. If we're going to finally embrace not drafting a rookie who's 24 years old, I might as well go with the top 7 dudes that are being, labeled in this consensus ranking. They're all freshmen. Like we're taking a chance on an 18, 19-year-old, which we haven't done since Fox. And I think that's something that we really will benefit from, getting that kind of youth that we can mold. And then in 5 years, when their 5th year in the league is Keegan's age, that's where we feel comfortable actually being able to develop. So I think Caleb Wilson would fit that mold. And we're going to definitely do, more draft talk. I've already been going deep into it, trying to I'm getting excited. I'm excited for March Madness. It's going to be a crazy stage this year. The Big 12 tournament features so many dudes in this discussion, in the top 5 discussion alone, that it's a cool season so far for college basketball. This is a really cool class. So I am excited to see what happens. And if the Kings, end up, the goal is number one, obviously, because it just puts you in the power position to do anything you want. But like, if the Kings end up with a top 5 pick, I'm going to provide you guys the reason why any one of these top 5 dudes is going to be like game changing for us. So I am really excited for what happens for the draft.
Yeah, 100%.
So I think, did you have any final thoughts before we head out here? Well, that's good. So let's pivot on. This was episode 120 of the Behind the Back podcast. We appreciate all you guys who stuck with us. We appreciate all the love and support. If you guys want to hit us up, you can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. For all y'all watching on YouTube, the social medias our socials are up above. The links to our socials are up above. For all you audio listeners out there, links to the descriptions are down below. Please give us a like, subscribe, rate, review, and follow the show. We appreciate growing with you guys each and every single week. You guys let us know how excited you are for March Madness. How excited are you for the Kings tank? Do you guys think we're going to end up with the number 1 overall pick? And do you guys think we're ultimately just going to botch it up like always? How'd you guys feel now that football's over? We got 6 months without football, guys. So we're definitely going to be leaning back into the basketball of it all. But like Ben said, we're going to be touching up on our old takes, some embarrassing ones that I'm already reliving in my head that I'm not excited for, but we're definitely going to review, because if we can't laugh at ourselves, then what's the whole point? So with that being said, I'm Marcos Conegro, and beside me here as always is
Ben the Jet Rats.
All right, y'all, we love y'all. We will talk to you next week.
Peace.